Western multinational in particular, it makes great sense to come to India, figure out how to deal with all these things, build your emerging market model, and then go replicate it in other countries. And what I saw is in about 25, 30, 40 companies, their success in India has actually translated into huge success in many other parts of the world. How? In 3 or 4 ways. One, they've learned to deal with chaotic environments. Okay? And so when they see this in the environment in Nigeria, oh, it's completely familiar. Okay? They're not upset about it. They're not stressed about it. So that's one. The second is, if you look at the structure of the market itself, in all emerging markets, and certainly in India, you have a small affluent segment, people like you, okay, who can buy global products. You can buy the iPhone, you can buy anything at global prices. But pretty quickly, you're into a middle class. The middle class might be the size of UK and Germany combined, okay? They have the same aspirations, but they don't have the disposable income. They want a car, but they can't afford a car, okay? They want a smartphone, but they can't afford it. And so what companies have to do is develop products for this segment, which delivers roughly 70 to 80% of the performance at 30% of the price, okay? So if you're Samsung making smartphones, you better figure out how to make smartphones at $55, $60. They can't afford phones at $550 and $600. Okay? If you're a telecom operator, you need to figure out how to make money at 1 cent a minute, not at 10 cents a minute. Okay? If you're GE Healthcare and you want to sell equipment into hospitals, you need to have X-ray machines and ECG devices at $1,000 or $800, not at 10x that price. So if you're going to crack the middle of the market in India, which is really where the bulk of the demand is, you have to fundamentally think differently and innovate. And by the way, if you do that, you can go to many other markets and they like those products as well. If you can succeed in India, you can succeed anywhere. If you fail here, you're dead in most emerging markets. Okay, so that's one thing. The second idea is what I call the midway trap. Most multinational companies, when they talk globalization, it's actually bullshit. Because what they've been doing for the last 20, 30 years is taking global products at global prices and exporting them to lots of countries. And when you export them, say, to Morocco, okay, what they're basically doing is selling it to rich Moroccans. They're not selling it to the emerging middle class and certainly not to poor Moroccans. And what globalization means in most companies is they're skimming the cream of the tops of all these countries. And that works well for a while, okay? But pretty soon what happens is you run out of growth. And so for 5, 6 years, life is good. Then what happens is that segment at the top gets saturated. Every other company is also aiming at the top, and your growth slows. And you hit a wall. Basically, if the industry is growing 5%, you grow 5%. If the industry is growing 10%, if you really run hard, you grow 10%. And what happens then in most companies is frustration sets in. And when frustration sets in, companies decide one of two things. They say, you know, India, it's just too damn hard. We read all the PR, we fell for it, but now it's a reality check. So guess what? We're glad we're there, but we're going to take a pass. We're now going to go to Myanmar. We're going to go to Africa. We're going to go to Indonesia, because these are easier places. We'll be back. We'll be back when? When growth comes back. We'll be back when India resembles a developed market. What does resemble a developed market means? It means India will start respecting intellectual property if you're a pharmaceutical company, okay? Or if you're a food company, when more Indians start eating meat, that's when we'll come back. Well, there's a mistake out here. I'll come back to that. So half the companies decide India's too tough, we'll come back 5 years, 10 years later when they look like us. And the biggest mistake, the company that made the biggest mistake was actually Apple. Okay, so in October of 2012, which is 9 months ago, Tim Cook was interviewed saying, what about India? So he says, what about India? So you guys are missing in action. You have 1% of the market. He says, yeah, but it's, I love India, quote unquote. This is what he said. I love India, but it's a very difficult market. The distribution system is very inefficient. When it improves, that's when we'll get back. Their direct competitor, Samsung, says, hell, we'll build the distribution system. And that's what they did. And they ran away with the smartphone market. And the Indian smartphone market is the 5th largest in the world. China's number 1, US is number 2, but India's number 5. And so suddenly Apple, their stock is getting hammered because they've lost India and most emerging markets. Okay? And now they're scrambling to catch up, it's expensive, etc. The other set of companies say, you know what, India may be tough, but the real problem we have is the management of our country, that we have in India is useless. They're not executing well. So let's fire them and let's send some expats from headquarters. If you're a French company, let's send some French guys in here. Okay? And what they discover is it's a hard market. And 2 years later, the expats get frustrated. They're sick and tired of the power failures. The kids are unhappy at school. The wife is unhappy in India, and they leave. And you get into a revolving door of leadership. You have no continuity. Okay? So every 2 years you have a new management team. And so for both sets of companies, what's happening is India is moving into a state of drift. Meanwhile, one of their competitors gets their act together and they run away with the market. And this is what I saw happening systematically. That succeed are those that just tenaciously stay the course. The question is, why is it that so few companies actually do what is so obvious if you live in these markets, right? This sounds obvious, that you should localize quickly, you should not have too much dependence on expats, you should have local management teams in your countries, you should take a long-term view, etc. This sounds obvious. Why is it that only 1 out of 100 companies does it? And it turns out this is because their CEOs don't understand or like emerging markets. Okay? What I found is 97 out of 100 CEOs of Western companies have never lived or worked in emerging markets. Their entire experience is in the development. So they don't like the chaos of India or all these places. They come on the corporate jet, they stay for half a day, they bring their own food on the company jet because they don't trust what is served out there. Their knowledge of the market is based on PowerPoint and Excel presentations. It's not based on going shopping and getting a feel for what these markets are like. It's not based on talking to young people in these countries and seeing the amazing talent and energy that they have. And therefore they say, hey, this is too scary. Okay? They therefore get completely distracted by the chaos. 1 out of every 100 companies has a different type of CEO who I call a globalizer. These are people who like different cultures, okay, no matter what their nationality is. They like different cultures. They go into the market. There's one CEO who I loved. He goes into a country, rents a motorcycle and drives across to get a feel. Okay? So there are people like that. The CEO of John Deere, the tractor company, he took his whole senior management team and they worked on a farm in Rajasthan last year, the deserts of northwest India. And they realized, oh my God, the average Indian farm is smaller than a combine harvester. Okay? So there's no market here for our equipment. So we have to design completely different. So what's the risk for Microsoft? Not that we sell something cheap in India. It's that rich Americans will also want the cheap product. Okay? So you've got to keep things from flowing across markets. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
So what we said is, let's make the menus with a mixture of Indian characters and English. So nobody in the UK or the US will want it. And then we can price it cheap. That worked really well. Okay? So we call that Hinglish. So like that, you can get creative and do, many nice things, and it works well. So these CEOs, they operate differently. They go live the reality. They have a visceral understanding, and therefore they're able to make fundamentally different decisions than their counterparts. And what is happening quietly today is these companies are gradually becoming the new leaders of their industry.